Hello friends, in this video we are going to discuss culture personality school. We are doing anthropological theories. We have completed many of them. Now it's time for the culture personality school. Along with this culture personality school, we are going to talk about Margaret Mead, Ruth Benedict, Ralph Linton, Abraham Gardiner, and Cora Dubois. Okay. So as far as the culture personality school is concerned, it is very important because we see various questions which are coming from this particular section. So it is important for us to understand and learn them. As far as society is concerned, there is individual and there is social position. And that is something which makes person. So person is something, first he is an individual and then he has or she has a social position. As far as this individuality and personality is concerned, it constitutes a unit of culture. Individualism plus his personality, it constitutes a part of culture, right? So this is first thing, that individual plus his personality becomes a component of culture. Now fundamental unit of individual as well as culture becomes the personality, that how person is able to understand, how he is able to make sure that there is a link between this culture as well as personality. Now the personality, this is also known as school of thought. This is like culture personality. Okay, so this personality, it is also known as school of thought in psychological anthropology. Okay, so personality is also called as school of thought. Now we have to understand little history which is associated with it. So we'll start with the culture personality school. Okay, culture personality school. So around, you say, late 1920s and early 1930s, a group of American anthropologists started examining the aspects of studying the relationship between culture and personality. So this was the time when some American anthropologists, they started the relation between culture and personality. And important thing that they revealed was, first they revealed basically three important things. First was the influence of culture on personality. Influence of culture on personality, that is culture which shapes personality. This is first, culture which shapes personality, and this is approach of Margaret Mead. You have to understand and you have to remember that, because after completing culture personality school, we'll do with individual, that is Margaret Mead, Ralph Linton, Gardiner, Cora Dubois, etc. So you have to understand that this influence of culture on personality, it was being talked by Margaret Mead. Second was the influence of personality on culture. Second was influence of personality on culture. Now this was basically Ruth Benedict. Okay, now the third and last is that mutually interactive. So Margaret Mead said that culture influence personality? Ruth Benedict says personality influence culture. Now, this is the mutual interactive approach that both, that is personality and culture, they are interdependent and complementary on each other. So these are the basically three premises of culture personality school. Now if we start discussing, we have to understand that there are certain topics which are very important. So this is one of them. Ruth Benedict. So as far as Ruth Benedict is concerned, we have to understand that even directly a personality can come, that write a short note on this particular thing, or you will find her name and then you will have to write something about culture personality school. So we'll start with Ruth Benedict. So Ruth Benedict was of the pioneer student of Franz Boas. First we have to understand that culture personality school, it is somewhere you will find female anthropologist. Okay, so if question comes on contribution of female anthropologist in paper 1, you are supposed to write down about the culture personality school as well as the various females, for example Ruth Benedict, Margaret Mead, etc., Cora Dubose, etc. This will come under female. In paper 2 you will do with Iravati Karve and etc. So you have to understand that female anthropologist. So this was something which was brought by Franz Boas. So when Franz Boas started field visit, his fieldwork tradition, he understood that there is need of women to understand this society, because women also becomes a very important part of society, and they do not open up to such studies which are conducted by men, and hence the eminent need of women in anthropology was seen and then addressed by Franz Boas. So Ruth Benedict was a student of Franz Boas, and she was interested in comparative understanding. Comparative understanding. Now she understood, while doing so, she was interested of culture with specific or special reference to the personality formation. So culture and personality, how they are interdependent, interlinked, and which influence which. That is, Ruth Benedict said that personality influenced culture. So she was interested in comparative analysis or understanding of both culture and personality. Now every culture has a specific or particular dominant drive, right? Every culture has a dominant drive. Every culture has a dominant drive, and this is first. Second is that this dominant drive of culture is a product of total of the personality formation of its member. So this dominant drive is basically dependent upon the personality of its members. Okay. Third, that if we talk about certain examples that you can cite is, in some of the culture the member are aggressive, violent, and assertive, outgoing, extrovert, and in some culture they are defensive, submissive, peaceful, mild, introvert, and not active, basically passive. So this is what she wanted to explain, that in certain society a person is aggressive, in certain he is submissive. Here there is a violent person in one society, there is a peace in other. Someone is assertive, the other one is mild. The third one You say that there are people in the society who are extrovert, there are some people who are introvert, there are certain people who are active, and there are certain people who are passive. So that was the key understanding or issue which was talked by Ruth Benedict. So she wanted to explain this all thing, right? So she gave the three examples, and she gave three examples. Okay, these examples are important because whenever you will write any answer on culture personality school, particularly focusing on Ruth Benedict, you are supposed to write down. The first is of Zuni tribe. Okay, so Zuni tribe of, first it is of New Mexico. Okay, and this was studied by L.C. Person. Then second was Kwakitul. Write down the correct spelling, okay? There is first U and then T. Kwakitul. Kwakitul Indians. Okay, this was studied by Franz Boas. And third was Dobuans, which was studied by Rio Fortune. These were Melanesian tribes. Okay. Now she found that they are all different in their personality composition. Okay. So first she talks about Zuni tribe. So she found that Zuni people are sober. They are unoffensive, no tension, literally no tension, and no hallucination. And individualism is not a value, rather collective experience is valued. So there is basically a collective experience, collectiveness. Okay, so no individual values, rather than there is a collective experience of values. Now they adhere to the absolute discipline and formal rules. And L.C. Person, she writes that Zunis are very methodological, even during courtship. And Zunis have no emotional attachment towards their spouses in traditional context, but they adhere to the good behavior, and Benedict call it as Apollonian culture. Apollonian culture. So you have to understand that whenever you are talking about Ruth Benedict, right? This is very important because as far as Zuni tribe is concerned, we talked about certain characteristics, and now we talked about, they're called as Apollonian. See, there will be a concept will come as a Dionysian. So they are basically the Greek gods. Okay, that is important. That is everything that you need to know about them. And she termed them as Apollonian culture. Now on the other hand, the Kwakitul, they are opposite to this. These Kwakituls, they are opposite to this. And they are basically violent people. Okay, in historical past, they have performed cannibalism. Now what is cannibalism? We'll deal with cannibalism separately when we'll do the pecking man. Okay, but basically cannibalism is a feature or phenomena where a species will eat its own species. For example, a man eating a man, that is a cannibalism. A dog eating a dog is a cannibalism. Alright, so this is first. For example, king cobra, they are cannibals, they eat their own kind. So this is a second quality. And one thing about Kwakitul is that they eat the bodies of their slave. Then the chief dances in the religious ceremony will get possessed and will dance rigorously to the extent that fumes would come out of his mouth, and he is tied down to the train to prevent from causing further damage. And the member are careful about such situation. to this, Ruth Benedict, she called this culture as Dionysian. Okay, so you have to understand that you will write down this the three tribes, then you will write down certain qualities, and then you will write down Franz Boas, and according to Ruth Benedict, these are Dionysian and Apollonian culture. Okay, so Dionysian, it means something which is highly emotional, passionate, and aggressive, and they are different from one another. The third, that is Doboans, so they are still different. Their hostility and treachery are highest virtue, and among Doboans, the marriage begins with the tenancy of a young man's future mother-in-law. In the dominatory, the boys and girls spend nights. The Doboans will decide off for themselves, but on one of the occasion, the boy will find the mother-in-law standing outside the room and holding the digging stick and ask him to work in her field. That is the first ritual of the marriage, and conjugal conflicts are quite common among the Doboans. So okay, and extramarital affairs are also common, but when reported in public, it leads to witnessing of the violent. But when it is reported in the public, they see a violent quarrel and broken. For example, they'll do some damage. For example, they'll broke the cooking pots, or there may be a tendency of suicide. So Ruth Benedict conclude in these three society, the idea of normal is different. Okay, it is different from the dominant American culture among themselves. She says that whenever we took into the Western psychic term, we will find Zuni are neurotized and Kwakituls are megalomaniac, and the Doboans are paranoid. So I'll write down what Ruth Benedict, she talked about Zuni. So according to her, Zuni basically comes under neurotypes. Okay, then Kwakitul, they are basically megalomaniac, and Doboans basically paranoid, according to Ruth Benedict. Now if we try to conclude what Ruth Benedict has to say, that each culture has a unique pattern, and she call it as cultural configuration. That each culture has a separate cultural configuration. Second is, configuration of each society is based on the dominant personality type or dominant personality character. So these configuration, it is based on dominant personalities. Okay, and the third and last is that this culture is personality writ large, that is personality in its extended form. So culture is basically personality in its extended form. Alright, so this is what we have to conclude as far as Ruth Benedict is concerned. But at the same time, we have to understand that these particular parts are not free of criticism. Okay. So if we talk about the criticism, criticism, according to Ruth Benedict, of of Ruth Benedict, she does not explain in the first place why culture or its member should have particular personality type. So first is, anything comes with a need. So she did not specify what was the reason why there is a need of a particular personality type. Then she did not first she did does not explain in the first place why culture or its members should have particular personality type. Why? Okay. Second is, she does not explain how personality type are transmitted from one generation to another. Transmission of personality from one generation to another generation was also not explained by Ruth Benedict. The third is, she ignored those aspects of culture that did not fit into her cultural configuration model. For example, the drunkenness among Sunnis and the excessive exercise of say control practice by the Kwakitul. So self-control. For example, as we have talked, the Sunni tribe and Kwakitul. So we say that this is Apollonian and this is Dionysian. Okay, so this is something like good and this is bad. Okay, this is something that is termed, okay, Apollonian for good and Dionysian for the bad characteristics. Now she did it on her own. For example, you see there are certain characters which are not Apollonian or good. For example, the drunkenness. Okay, so the Zuni tribe, basically there is a prevalence of this drunkenness, and in Dionysian the people are good at, or they perform self-control. Okay, so this is a good quality, that is Apollonian quality, and this is a Dionysian quality, but both of the qualities are not basically discussed. So she have used it according to her own convenience. The national character study, she is known for her studies in the field of national character studies. National character study. Ruth Benedict. Okay. It is a new field which Ruth Benedict pioneered. This differed from other studies in terms of scale and methodology. And basically Ruth Benedict pioneered, and this is a shift from micro to macro, studies. So it required a different approach. This approach deals with industrial nation state. Now what this nation state means, we have discussed it. You can just go and type nation state in the previous in our playlist. So you will find a video on this, that what nation state means. Then rather than on simple society. So this studies deal with the industrial nation studies rather than simple society. And unlike other cultural personality theorists who worked with small number of people relying on key information and interviews of participant observation, unlike this, what Ruth Benedict did was she studied the evolved millions of people, and a new method had been developed by her. Now further, if the nation which is being studied is enemy nation, okay, if the nation that we study, for example, as far as Japanese society is concerned, we understand that it is very peaceful country right now, but during the world war, what havoc this country had brought onto the world was seen. So the anthropologist, they try to understand that what their psychology is, what they are learning, what they are understanding, and that is how they see or understand the psychology of Japanese by US basically. That is how US does. So this was second, that in further, if the nation which is being studied is enemy nation, then participant observation is not possible. If in case I want to study on, say for example, Uyghur province of China, so it is difficult for me to go there and study with full freedom. Even if I'm Chinese, this is difficult for me to go and study there with full-fledged individuality and freedom. So this is first thing. The second thing is that participant observation, that I'll go there and participate in the society and learn how they think, it is not going to happen. So she developed an alternative method to study. What she did, she analyzed the mass media. Okay, what she did, she analyzed the mass media. Okay, at the same time, what she did, she analyzed the newspaper, literature, film, and all other relevant government records. And in addition to this, she also conducted the interviews of immigrants, and thus she produced one famous work, which is The Chrysanthemum and the Sword in 1946, and to describe the Japanese national character. This was done to describe the Japanese national character. During the World War II, the Americans were very keen to know the Japanese nation. So Ruth Benedict examined the child rearing practice to adult personality time. In Japan, the toilet training is practiced is very, very rigorous and thorough. So that is instilled the Japanese preoccupation with obedience and discipline. She also found that the Japanese have followed two distinct methodologies. So during the World War II, the Americans were very keen to know the Japanese nation character. So Ruth Benedict examined the child rearing practice to adult personality. Okay, in Japan, the toilet training practice is very rigorously done, and hence this thing brings the obedience and discipline in the Japanese children, and that is something which is followed throughout the lifetime. Now, there are two distinct methods of child rearing and adolescent rearing. Okay, so that is what we are going to talk now. Okay, so the first is that the method of child rearing. First method of child rearing includes love, freedom, care, and cooperation, whereas second, it is through strict discipline. Okay, now the other work under national character study is by Grorer and Rickman. So the under this, that is national character study. National character study is basically done by Grorer and Rickman. Alright, so this is something which is different. Now they argued that in Russia, the national character is comparable with that of manic depressive type. That is, they connect it with the child rearing practices, and the Russian peasant cultivators adopt the practice of swaddling infant, in which the mother leaves the child. This formed the basis to explain the politics of Cold War, and they are established a new area of culture within the field of psychological anthropology. So this is something which is important because they studied this national character of the Russia. These two people, that is Grover and Rickman, they studied the national characters of Russia. Okay, so this is first. So in the next video we meet with Margaret Mead and other. So thank you for watching. Stay tuned.